Here I'm showing the Victron 32 amp Autotransformer, the insides. I've just completed the wiring for it. I'm going to use it to change the 120 volt single phase output of the Lycan 5000 to a 240 volt, 120/240 volt split phase output, so that it's compatible with my whole house transfer switch. So it's been wired according to the diagram. There's many ways to wire this auto transformer, but you can see here I've got 120 volts coming in to the two terminals that are designated for that purpose, the neutral and the L2 is what's shown in the document. So the hot wires wired to the L2 and the neutral is wired to the neutral. The neutral is shared with the output neutral, so that's the reason I have this huge wire nut, because it's got three large wires. It's got the input neutral and the output neutral wired together and plugged into the input port. And the output then uses again the neutral that comes in from the input. So that goes to the output as neutral. And the two legs, the red and black wires, are the two legs, the 220 volt legs that are out of phase. So 240 volt loads run across the red and black wires, and the neutral, of course, is in the middle of the two. So there you go. The ground wire is shared between input and output. Since the Lycan 5000 does not have neutral tied to ground, this is an okay situation for stationary installation, because what's going to happen is that the ground of the transfer switch, which is grounded to the mains, will pass through this and safety ground the Lycan 5000 cabinet. This is fine for a stationary installation. So we're not using an earth ground that would cause a ground loop. We don't need that in this case, and it would cause all kinds of problems with the GFI circuitry, because if the Lycan had neutral connected to ground, but it doesn't, so that's great. So its neutral is independent, and the neutral bonding to ground happens at the service panel of the house, which is passed through to the transfer switch, which is passed through to this. Right, so the Lycan cabinet then is grounded to the service panel ground, albeit circuitously, pun intended. Okay, so I'm ready for a test. I'm going to test this without the Lycan first by simply running an input from, I have a dedicated 220 volt line coming to the garage. I'm going to plug this in. I have only one leg of this 220 volt. I have only one leg of this being fed into the auto transformer. This is just for testing. Later on, this will be plugged into the Lycan, either through the a conversions cable. This is a conversion cable. It converts the 4-pin 220 volt into a 3-pin 30 amp 120 volt. I don't like this because it basically ties both of the two legs together, leg 1 and leg 2, and I just don't like it as an adapter. So I'm going to, after my testing is done, I'm going to rewire this so I don't use the adapter, and I'm going to instead replace this cable, this plug, with the plug that goes into the Lycan, the 30 amp, 120 volt, 30 amp plug. And therefore that will ensure that this thing is never plugged into anything but 120 volts, single phase. And it's on using the black wire. I'm not even using the red wire. But it's connected down here. So I don't like that. So I will avoid that by rewiring the end of this cable, and it then will plug directly into the Lycan down at the bottom, the 30 amp port. Okay, so that's where we are with this, and the next step now is to test it, and then just make sure we got all the voltages and nothing goes awry, which, is always a possibility. And then if that's all good, we will then complete the wiring into the house and reboot the Lycan and see how it goes.